He was one of the richest men in Europe, yet he lived as if money didn't belong to him. Ingvar Kamprad, founder of IKEA, drove the same old Volvo for decades, flew economy class, reused tea bags, and shopped at flea markets. When journalists asked why, he smiled and said, "It's a matter of discipline, not poverty." He built a global empire worth billions, yet kept his shoes long after their soles had worn thin. To some, it was eccentricity. To him, it was order. Simplicity wasn't an aesthetic. It was morality. Every morning he would sit by the window of a small cafe in Elmhult wearing a gray sweater, reading the newspaper and taking notes with a dull pencil. No entourage. No noise. Just a man still learning. Still measuring the world by efficiency rather than excess. This was the paradox of Ingvar Kamprad, a billionaire who despised luxury. A leader who refused hierarchy. A visionary who believed that greatness comes from subtraction, not addition. He once said, "Only those who sleep in silk sheets forget what work feels like." To him, frugality was not about saving money. It was about saving meaning. In a world obsessed with appearance, he built a brand rooted in purpose to make good design accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy few. He didn't see a table as wood and nails. He saw it as dignity, something that allowed a young family to sit together and call it home. He never wore a crown. He wore humility. So who was Ingvar Kamprad, really? A businessman? A monk? A designer of dreams wrapped in flat boxes? He didn't build IKEA to sell furniture. He built it to prove that simplicity, when done right, can be the most powerful form of sophistication. Because for Ingvar Kamprad, saving wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Long before IKEA became a household word, there was a boy growing up among the forests and frozen lakes of southern Sweden, a place called Småland. The land was beautiful, but hard. The soil was rocky, the winters long, and every family learned to make do with less. Out there, thrift wasn't a virtue. It was survival. Ingvar Kamprad was born in 1926 on a small farm called Elmtoryd near the village of Agunnaryd. His parents were humble farmers, quiet, practical, and endlessly disciplined. They taught him three things that would define his life: never waste, never borrow, and never give up. He was a restless child, always scheming, always trading. At 5, he sold matches to neighbors. At 7, he realized he could buy them in bulk from Stockholm and resell for a profit. It wasn't greed, it was curiosity. He was fascinated by the rhythm of exchange, how effort turned into reward, how small margins multiplied into something meaningful. Soon he was selling fish, Christmas cards, pens, and even seeds. Each venture taught him the same truth: wealth was not about possession. It was about imagination. He once said, "If you want to change the world, start with what's in your pocket." While other children dreamed of adventure, Ingvar dreamed of efficiency. He loved order counting, sorting, recording every coin in his notebook. When his father rewarded him for good grades, he didn't spend the money. He reinvested it into the next idea. He believed that simplicity could be engineered, that systems could turn chaos into calm. At 17, he officially founded his first company. The name came naturally. IKEA formed from his initials, and the farm and village that raised him. It was a tribute, a compass, a reminder of where every lesson began. At first, IKEA sold pens, wallets, picture frames, small practical goods that reflected his Småland roots. He mailed catalogs to rural homes, cutting costs by avoiding middlemen. Every crown saved was passed on to the customer. The model was simple, revolutionary, and deeply moral, affordable quality for the many, not luxury for the few. But his ambition was quiet, not loud. He wasn't dreaming of fame or empires. He was chasing a principle that good design should never belong only to the rich. His friends described him as stubborn, methodical, and strangely humble for a boy with such vision. He would work long hours at a wooden desk, his handwriting small, his ledgers immaculate. Ingvar grew up during the shadows of war and depression. He watched his parents stretch every resource, patching clothes, reusing tools, repairing before replacing. These weren't hardships to him, they were lessons in respect. He often said waste of resources is a mortal sin. By his early 20s, IKEA had outgrown its village roots. He began experimenting with furniture, sensing that the post-war generation wanted homes, not ornaments. Function over prestige. It was a quiet revolution waiting to happen. Ingvar Kamprad had no investors, no factories, and no title. Just a belief that by simplifying what others overcomplicated, he could bring dignity to everyday life. He didn't chase the world, he built for the people who made it. Because to him, resourcefulness wasn't about scarcity. It was about respect for time for labor and for the quiet power of doing more with less. By the early 1950s, Ingvar Kamprad was running a modest mail-order business from the quiet town of Älmhult. He sold pens, frames, watches, and wallets to rural families who couldn't afford city stores. But something was missing, something that would transform his small enterprise into a global idea. He noticed that customers kept asking for affordable furniture, sturdy tables, chairs, wardrobes. The war had ended and Europe was rebuilding. Families needed homes again, comfort again. But traditional furniture was expensive, heavy, and designed for the few, not the many. Ingvar saw opportunity in that frustration. If he could make beautiful furniture simple enough to transport and cheap enough for ordinary people, he could change not just a market, but a mindset. He began working with small local carpenters to create furniture that was functional, minimalist, and cheap to produce. But there was one obstacle: shipping. Large furniture cost more to transport than to make. One afternoon, as his team prepared for a product exhibition, an employee struggled to fit a bulky table into a delivery car. Frustrated, he unscrewed the legs. The table slid in perfectly. Ingvar froze, then smiled. That moment changed everything. Flat Pack was born, furniture that could be disassembled, boxed, and shipped efficiently. It was revolutionary: less cost, less space, less waste. Ingvar instantly recognized its power. It wasn't just a logistical trick, it was a philosophy. Design stripped to its essence. Form serving function. He once said, "The word impossible only exists in the dictionary of fools." With Flat Pack, he made the impossible accessible. The design was democratic, allowing anyone anywhere to afford and assemble their own home. Ingvar called it democratic design, a balance between beauty, function, and low price. But innovation breeds enemies. Traditional Swedish manufacturers accused him of destroying craftsmanship and undercutting prices. They boycotted his suppliers, banned him from fairs, and called IKEA an insult to Swedish quality. Ingvar didn't fight back with anger. He adapted. He found new partners in Poland, where skilled workers were eager, materials were cheaper, and quality remained high. What began as necessity became strategy, the birth of IKEA's global supply chain. He turned exclusion into evolution. Ingvar believed that pressure revealed character. While others panicked under resistance, he refined his model: cut costs, increase quality, simplify everything. The more they block us, he told his team, the smarter we'll become. By the late 1950s, IKEA had grown into a movement. The catalogs became cultural icons, showing small apartments filled with light wood and balance, a vision of attainable beauty. People didn't just buy furniture, they bought a feeling. The feeling of control, of creation, of belonging. Ingvar Kamprad had found his voice, and it spoke in assembly instructions, simple sketches and boxes that fit perfectly into any car. He didn't just invent a business model, he invented a new way of living. The Flat Pack was more than efficiency. It was equality, an invitation for ordinary people to take part in design, to build with their own hands the world they wanted to live in. He proved that simplicity, when combined with purpose, can become a revolution, and that sometimes the smallest screw can hold up the weight of a dream. By the 1960s, the Flat Pack revolution had spread beyond Sweden. IKEA was no longer a mail-order business. It was a new philosophy taking physical form. And Ingvar Kamprad, the quiet boy from Småland, had become its architect. He didn't just want to sell furniture. He wanted to build a world, one where simplicity, efficiency, and empathy shaped every experience. In 1958, he opened the first IKEA showroom in Älmhult. It wasn't like other stores. Instead of pushing customers toward sales counters, Ingvar invited them to explore. There were fully furnished rooms, warm lighting, simple paths, and handwritten price tags. It felt less like shopping and more like walking through possibility. People came not just to buy, they came to believe. He designed the store as a journey, a single continuous path, winding through kitchens, bedrooms, and living rooms. Every layout told a story of life's small victories. A tidy desk, a sturdy chair, a soft lamp in the dark. To Ingvar, order was beauty, and every detail from arrows on the floor to the smell of coffee in the cafeteria was part of that order. He often said, "We design for people, not for show." While most CEOs built glass towers in big cities, Ingvar kept headquarters in tiny Elmhult. He refused marble floors, fancy offices, or private parking spots. Every employee ate in the same cafeteria, including him. He arrived early, carried his own tray, and sat wherever there was space. Leadership to him wasn't distance, it was proximity. He built a culture where humility was policy. No titles, no luxury, no waste. Every new manager received a simple rule book. Simplicity and common sense should characterize everything we do. When IKEA began expanding across Europe, Ingvar guarded the brand's soul like a craftsman guards his tools. He obsessed over logistics, studied customer feedback, and personally visited factories to check wood quality. Even as profits grew, he scolded executives who stayed in expensive hotels or approved glossy packaging. Every krona wasted, he warned, is stolen from the customer. The stores became cathedrals of functionality, labyrinths of light, rhythm, and warmth. Families spent hours there, walking, eating, imagining. Children played in the model rooms while parents dreamed of better homes. IKEA was no longer about furniture. It was about life design. Yet for all his precision, Ingvar never lost his humanity. He answered letters from customers by hand. He thanked cleaners and cashiers as equals. To him, the soul of the company was not the catalog or the chair. It was the people who made them, sold them, and used them. By the 1970s, IKEA had become a global name: efficient, affordable, loved. But for Ingvar, success was not the destination. It was proof that discipline could be kind and that humility could scale. He didn't build an empire of luxury. He built an empire of order, a world where design served everyone and simplicity ruled as law. By the 1980s, IKEA had conquered continents. Stores stood like quiet temples of order across Europe, North America, and Asia. Millions of customers filled their homes with the soft lines and simple beauty of Scandinavian design. Ingvar Kamprad had become one of the richest men in the world, but to him, nothing had changed. He still flew economy class, refused chauffeurs, and stayed in budget hotels. At breakfast meetings, he poured his own coffee and reminded his executives, "We are not a company of millionaires. We are a company for the many." His watch was cheap, his suit decades old, and his wallet, a worn piece of leather patched at the corners, had been with him since youth. He didn't wear symbols of power. He wore purpose. Inside IKEA, his humility was law. Managers were forbidden to show status. No fancy offices. No corner windows. He banned unnecessary meetings and corporate jargon, insisting that ideas come from the warehouse floor, not the boardroom. The true expert, he said, is the one who stacks the boxes. He wrote a 10-page manifesto called The Testament of a Furniture Dealer, a declaration of values so raw and human that it became IKEA's Bible. In it, he preached frugality, simplicity, and the dignity of hard work. "Waste of resources," he wrote, "is a mortal sin." The words weren't metaphor, they were moral code. He made humility the foundation of leadership. When an employee made a mistake, Ingvar didn't punish them, he asked what the company could learn from it. When a product failed, he thanked the team for trying. If you never make mistakes, he told them, you never make progress. He was equally demanding of himself. At company gatherings, he asked others to critique him publicly. Some employees thought it was strange, a billionaire inviting judgment. But to Ingvar, self-reflection was survival. Complacency, he warned, is the furniture of failure. His view of wealth was almost monastic. He believed that money detached from purpose was poison. The true reward of success, he said, was not comfort, but responsibility, the duty to serve, to create, to improve. He often quoted the Swedish proverb, "He who buys what he does not need, steals from himself." Even at the height of fame, Ingvar avoided cameras and interviews. The furniture should be famous, he said, not the man behind it. He wanted the idea to outlive the ego. Under his leadership, IKEA became the symbol of democratic design furniture, not for the elite, but for the everyday dreamer. A young couple furnishing their first apartment, a student on a budget. a family starting over. They all belonged in his vision. He once said, IKEA is not a company. It's a movement against waste, against arrogance, against the idea that quality belongs only to the rich. That was the paradox of Ingvar Kamprad. He ruled an empire built on humility. He led millions by refusing to stand above them, because he understood that the highest form of leadership is not power, it's restraint. Every great life has its shadow, and Ingvar Kamprad's was no exception. By the late 1990s, after half a century of quiet triumph, the past came knocking. Old records surfaced showing that as a teenager, he had briefly joined a pro-fascist youth group during World War II. The revelation shocked Sweden, a nation that had come to see him as the moral face of modern business. Reporters demanded answers. Competitors called him a hypocrite, and the man who had spent decades preaching humility suddenly found himself forced to live it. He didn't hide. He didn't deny. He faced it. In a public letter, he called it the greatest mistake of my life, one I will never cease to regret. He spoke softly with the weight of a man who understood that guilt like success can last a lifetime. I was young, foolish, and blind, he said, but the responsibility is mine, not my years. For Ingvar, the scandal became more than a reckoning. It was transformation. He redirected his shame into purpose. He expanded IKEA's humanitarian programs, increased donations to refugee support and education, and strengthened the company's commitment to diversity and equality. Inside IKEA, every policy was re-examined. We are builders, he said. So let us build bridges, where once there were walls. He withdrew further from the spotlight, retreating to Switzerland for decades to live quietly with his wife. He continued to work, still signing letters by hand, still calling stores to check details. His mind never stopped organizing, optimizing, refining. Even in solitude, he remained a craftsman. But now, he was crafting peace. When age began to slow him, he returned home to Småland, the land that had raised him, hardened him, and forgiven him. His old Volvo was still parked by the farmhouse, his schedule still precise. Every morning he rose early, read the newspaper, drank coffee, and reflected. There is no retirement from curiosity, he once said. He spent his last years teaching a quieter kind of leadership, one based not on ambition, but atonement. He met with young entrepreneurs, urging them to lead with humility and conscience. He spoke often about failure not as something to fear, but as something to study. It's not enough to build, he said. You must also rebuild yourself, your principles, your purpose. The world had forgiven him, but more importantly, he had learned to forgive himself. He knew that a perfect legacy was impossible, only an honest one could endure. So he turned his guilt into gratitude, his silence into service. Because Ingvar Kamprad understood something most never do, that the greatest test of character is not how you handle success, but how you face your own shadow. He had built an empire of order. Now, in the stillness of old age, he built something greater, an empire of conscience. On a cold January morning in 2018, Ingvar Kamprad passed away peacefully at his home in Småland, the same rugged corner of Sweden where his story began. There were no grand memorials, no lavish tributes, just the sound of wind over the pines and the quiet rhythm of a life that had come full circle. The man who gave the world IKEA left it exactly as he had lived, humbly, efficiently, and on his own terms. His empire stretched across more than 50 countries with hundreds of stores and millions of customers. But to those who knew him, Ingvar's greatest legacy wasn't the furniture, it was the philosophy behind it. He had taken the cold mechanics of business and infused them with warmth, empathy, and moral discipline. He turned frugality into faith, simplicity into structure, and service into art. He once said, "To design for the many is to serve humanity." That sentence became the blueprint of everything IKEA stood for. Every flat box, every Allen key, every showroom kitchen was a small act of democracy, proof that good design shouldn't be locked behind wealth. He believed that beauty should be practical and practicality should be beautiful. Design, he said, is not about showing off. It's about showing respect for the user, for the material, for the world. Under his vision, IKEA became not just a retailer, but a teacher, teaching millions how to live with less, how to assemble, reuse, and care. It was capitalism with conscience scaled by simplicity. Even after his death, his fingerprints remained in every corner of the company. IKEA's cafeterias still serve meatballs at cost. Its executives still fly economy, and its catalog, once second only to the Bible in global circulation, still opens with the same promise for the many people. To his followers and critics alike, Ingvar Kamprad represented a paradox, a billionaire monk, a perfectionist of imperfection, a man who conquered the world by refusing to stand above it. He didn't chase legacy. He lived it quietly in every act of restraint. He believed that success without humility was chaos, that ambition without conscience was noise, and that the truest wealth was not stored in banks but in the trust of people. In his final years, when asked how he wanted to be remembered, he simply said, "As a man who tried to make life a little easier, tried to make business a little fairer, tried to make simplicity sacred again." Ingvar Kamprad didn't just build furniture. He built a framework for living, for leading, for lasting. And within that framework lies his final lesson that greatness doesn't come from what you add to the world, but from what you choose to leave out. Because simplicity in the end is not the absence of complexity, it's the mastery of it.